Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining me today for this additional part of the Beauty from Tragedy series. I'm going to be speaking to you a little bit about resilience, wellness, and empowerment as part of CARE's initiatives. And just to let you know about what's going to be happening today, I'll give a short presentation about resilience, wellness, and empowerment. And then you can contact me throughout the program with questions or afterwards for additional information on how to kind of enhance this information in your individual life, in your group, in your business, and how to apply these tools to enhance wellness and empowerment in your life through the wonderful science of resilience. So, as we begin, I just want to talk a little bit about who I am. I am the founder of CARE, the Center for Authentic Resilient Empowerment, and I received graduate training in counseling psychology and have had an interest in resilience in particular and positive psychology for the last 20 years or so. And I've presented on these topics on over 250 times in community settings as well as in professional settings and also in humanitarian settings. And this was done nationally and internationally in 9 states in the US and then 7 countries around the world and growing. I have past, current, and past leadership experience in this field, and I've also taught at the university level. I also do therapy work. And I'm a resilience scholar with interest in this area, like I said, for 20 years. I've spoken about this subject many times. I'm an author, I'm a consultant and a leader, and now also the founder of CARE, which is the Center for Authentic Resilient Empowerment. And hopefully today, by the end of today, we can talk about some of these things just to kind of get you interested in this topic. And these are some of the things that you can learn through CARE. And then once you book a consultation or you do so for your business or for your practice or whatever you're using, we can enhance some of this and teach even more through our programming. So we're learning a little bit about what positive psychology is and why we need to study this, some historical background of positive psychology and a focus on strengths, and core concepts of positive psychology, interventions associated with positive psychology, and then understanding resilience and its relationship to positive psychology, as well as fostering and enhancing resilience in adults and children. And then identifying your individual strengths for either you as an individual or you as your company, and how to harness this and to make it grow. And again, I'll just touch on this a little bit briefly on all of these topics, but we would delve into this much deeper if we were doing this as a consultation or as a speaking engagement, workshops, seminars, or even classes for you or your business. Okay, so how many times have we all felt like this in the last couple of years, in the last, specifically during this time with COVID and now hearing about wars and all kinds of things happening? But how many times have you felt like this in a week, in a month, in a year? And it's been a very difficult experience, of course. And resilience, we need to kind of reflect on these difficult moments in order to harness resilience. Resilience is kind of the antidote or the medicine to all of the stress that we've been experiencing. So think about the pandemic in particular and other difficult times you've experienced and what those have been like for you. Where have there been times of difficulty and where have there been times of growth? And what have you learned about yourself during these difficult times? And what strengths have you found out about yourself? And have you learned a new skill that you have kind of learned and adapted to this difficult situation that you're in? Whether it's been in the last few years, whether it's been in the last few days or weeks, or whether it's been in other challenging times in your life. So, positive psychology is the scientific study of optimal human functioning, and so it's not this rose-colored perspective that everything in the world is perfect and great, but it is a goal of how to better understand and apply factors that we can use in communities, in individuals, in groups, and how to help them to thrive. So it's the science of optimal human functioning. It's not this naive perspective, like I just said, where you see the world through rose colored glasses and everything is perfect and rainbows and wonderful all the time. Instead, there's a focus on balancing between positive and negative emotions and finding a way to kind of adapt when negative emotions come, when negative experiences come. So there's a study of pathology in mental health, and that's important. But the focus should be also balanced and not just on the pathological aspects or the traumatic aspects of individuals. So we have to look at both aspects. We have to hold both. We are paying respect to the difficult times and the challenging times, and even the times of suffering, and we're not minimizing those. But to balance the perspective a little bit, we have to look at how people have overcome or have adapted to those negative situations. So, positive psychology consists of looking at studies of well being, studies of happiness, studies of a concept called flow, which I'll talk about briefly, of personal strengths and character strengths, of wisdom, of creativity, of resilience, which we'll focus on mostly today. And then it looks at the imagination and the characteristics of groups and individuals and institutions and applying these things to those concepts. So, the whole goal is to flourish. How can we have positive mental health? How can we have thriving? How can we have prosperity and faring well, and be free of mental illness, and managing mental illness, and having this vitality and positive functioning in private as well as group realms. So when we talk about flourishing, we're looking at living optimally, and experiencing the good things of life. And it's a ratio, really, because there is a lot of negative. And so we have to kind of, again, balance that negative with the positive. And research tells us that the ratio of about 3 to 1, 3 positive to every 1 negative experience, kind of balances things out a little bit better. So there should be 3 positive experiences to keep things balanced. And so this also holds true for business, for work, for relationships, for companies, and for communities as well. And built into the American Constitution is this pursuit of happiness. It's an aspiration for human beings. How can we be happier? How can we have this measure of social progress? How can we have this important concept where we look at life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? And is happiness as an emotion, or is it a description of life as a whole? And there's this concept of kind of looking at happiness versus joy. And is happiness a kind of a transient concept? Sometimes happiness is more transient because it is attached or tethered to some sort of experience, whereas joy is a way of being. It's a way of waking up in the morning and knowing that we can still have joy based on our thoughts, and we have a choice to lead ourselves in that direction, even when things are difficult. So we want to question what contributes to happiness and how do we know when we have found it? Well, there's 5 essential things that have been found in research that are related to well-being, and balancing these out, not attention to one area and neglecting the rest, but a balance of these things through research has shown us to create elements of at least well-being. So to have career well-being, where you spend most of your time during your day, it should be something meaningful that you're engaged in, something that you really enjoy doing. And then having social relationships balanced as well, having relationships that trust you and you trust them, and having the experience of love and having the experience of connectedness to other people. And then having financial well-being, not feeling strapped all the time financially, or not being able to pay bills or to do the things that we are enjoying, and having a sense of well-being. Also having good physical health, eating good meals, taking walks, doing good exercise, having this good energy from good amounts of sleep, healthy foods, healthy exercise relates to physical well-being. Then we also want to have community well-being. So it's not just the relationships or one-on-one relationships or one-on-one experiences of love, but having a role within your community and participating in the community in which you live. And research has shown us that 66% of people are doing well in at least one area. But again, the greater balance that we have, the greater well-being we have. But research also tells us that only about 7% of people are doing well in all 5 areas. And the pursuit over one over the other will not result in well-being. And those who have more of those areas balanced tend to have more elements of these. They tend to thrive a little bit better as well. So the 5 ways to well-being help us to be more connected to each other, help us to be more active and take care of our body and our mind, which are very much well connected to each other, and helps us to take notice and savor positive experiences. So if we stop and smell the roses and don't rush through life, we tend to have greater well-being because we can bank those experiences into our mind. We also want to keep learning and not just be stagnant and be staying where we are. We also want to keep growing and learning at all times. And once we have the self-care and we're active and we're connected, we want to give to others and do altruistic things. And that's been related to well-being as well, because we're not just staying within ourselves, but we're also connected to others. There's also been research on these two models of well-being and wellness, and they relate to, again, a kind of balance of several areas in our lives. And back to the 5 areas of well-being, we found that the happiest countries, sometimes they're in Scandinavia, but they often tend to have a greater balance of those areas, those 5 areas of well-being we just spoke about. Often Denmark comes up at the top of those lists, but there have been other countries all over the world that have been found in the top 10 that have exhibited those areas of well-being as well. So again, areas of balance, we need to have more positive emotions, we need to be engaged, we need to have good positive relationships and meaning in our lives, as well as a sense of accomplishment. We also need to balance areas of spirituality and our physical health, as well as our intellectual capacities and increasing and learning and growing. Relationships comes up here again as well as good emotional health that helps us feeling all the different kinds of emotions and balancing those emotions as well. So again, tapping into these areas through care is one of the things that we can work on, and learning how to balance all of these different areas in our life and how they can help us to grow and be more resilient. There have been also barriers to our wellness. We often bend towards a little bit of a negativity bias, which helps us to pay more attention to the negative things and give more weight to the negative things than to the positive things in our lives. And that can again be adaptive, because there's a thought that if I lean a little bit negative, then I'll be able to figure out what the problems are, what the worst case scenario is, and then I can problem solve. However, to balance this out again, we need a 3-to-1 positive to negative emotions ratio. And then there's a theory also there as well, and some science to support this, that when we evaluate our positive and our negative emotions, duration doesn't matter. It could be something that is a short duration or a long duration, but instead we focus on the peak of those experiences and how the experience ends. And so again, to be more resilient is to help us to look at a balanced perspective of all of these things. And then there's a social comparison that also is a barrier to wellness, when we try to keep up with our neighbors and our friends. And then we're not really happy because we're chasing this unattainable goal in particular, and we're not trying to see what is meaningful and what is keeping us resilient, but instead we're trying to maintain a social status, and it's not out of necessity or out of meaning, it is out of this desire to keep up with our neighbors and friends. So the core theories of positive psychology are strength theory, that we all have strength within us that we can use and they can help us to grow. And then when we focus on positive emotions, we tend to find ways to expand our ability to think and problem solve and to grow out of difficulty. So problem solving also happens with positive emotions, and not necessarily with those negativity biases that we just talked about. And also the positive emotions help us to undo the damage of the negative emotions. So it's important for 2 reasons to have those positive emotions. They help us to build, and at the same time to eliminate the difficult emotions that we have had from experiences. And then there's resilience, which is my area, which is what CARE focuses on and what we try to build on the most, which is this blue square at the end. So our strengths help us to kind of understand and build, and they help us to manage on focusing on the good things in our lives, not just on weaknesses. They help us to go beyond this let's fix it approach to using our strengths to build. And we often don't focus on strengths. For example, think if you have a child in your care and this child brings home great grades and 1 poor grade. You will focus on the 1 poor grade before you focus on all of the good grades, usually. But the strengths focus helps us to focus on more than one perspective and to focus on what is going well, to help us to work on the areas that are not going so well. So if we do not focus on the strengths, the person just becomes an average person and they don't reach their full potential. So we need to focus on the strengths because they help us to build the areas that are weak and help us to reach our full potential. So there are 24 character strengths that have been found in humans around the world. And these are great because they benefit us, but they also help us to benefit other people. And there's a website where you can go and take a test. I have no affiliation with the website, but it is often recommended to help us to find our strengths. And it's a great tool, and that can help us to grow as well through determining our strengths and leaning towards resilience. So our strengths are different from our talents because our talents are not grounded in things that are morality based, but they are things that can, again, help us and help others as well. So our strengths are grounded in morality based. Talents are not grounded in morality. So that means that strengths are a part of every aspect of our lives, and they're rarely wasted. For example, a talent could be playing a certain sport. Let's say it's soccer. So you may have a talent where you're able to play soccer really well, and you may or may not choose to play soccer. So you could use that talent and grow it and develop it and become a great champion of soccer. But it's not morality based. And a person could choose not to play soccer, even if they're talented in it. And in that case, that talent may be wasted. But strengths are part of our everyday occurrences, everyday aspects of our lives. And the 24 strengths that we just mentioned are determined to be present in a range in individuals, and it manifests in their behaviors, in their thoughts, in their feelings, in their actions. And that's why they're part of our everyday lives and are rarely wasted. They're part, again, of our morality. They're generalizable across situations and time, and they contribute to the fulfillment of a good life for ourselves and others if we use them. So because they're so morally valued, they're really, really important to foster, to develop, and to grow, and to help lead us closer to resilience. In terms of positive emotions, they come from our brains. The prefrontal cortex of the brain is related to emotional regulation, goals, and pathways. And the increased activity that happens in the amygdala region of the brain is related to negative emotions and negative feelings. So that part's really, really activated when fear, for example, is activated. And so positive emotions can come from the brain. They can also come as we make progress towards a goal. You can see positive emotions come up as we advance in career, as we advance in our academics, as we advance in life goals that we have. And so when we feel positive emotions, we also recognize those emotions in others. And that takes a larger perspective and helps us to kind of expand and look at life at a larger perspective. There are 10 positive emotions, and the more that we foster these, the more that they create positive feelings in us and ability, again, to problem solve and expand our mind. And the more we move away from these towards negative emotions, the more our mind kind of shuts down and doesn't allow us to do things like positive activities and positive self-thought and positive ways to get out of situations. So the 10 emotions are joy, gratitude, serenity, interest, hope, pride, amusement, inspiration, awe, and love. And again, we can talk about these in greater detail in any one of the programs that CARE offers. So oftentimes we anticipate good times. We plan weddings, we plan baby showers, we plan retirement parties and graduation parties, but do we really adapt to bad times? We don't really plan for those. So we have to sometimes adapt when the roadblocks happen in our lives, and they do happen from time to time. So how do we adapt? Do we bend to those situations and kind of become more flexible and adaptive, or do we become more rigid? And the more rigid we become, the less resilient we become. So we need to be flexible and open to new experiences and to maneuvering through a challenge, through those roadblocks, because we don't often anticipate for those difficult times. We want to move as someone away from someone who is carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders to someone who's really resilient, who is able to thrive even in the midst of arid, dry, difficult circumstances and experiences. And again, that's what CARE helps us to do, is to help us to figure out ways to navigate through those arid, dry, difficult times. So research tells us that when somebody goes through a difficult time, they may go through one of these 4 things. They can succumb to the difficulties that they're experiencing, or their functioning may become impaired. or they survive and they continue to function with or without impairment. Or they may dip below where their baseline was before this difficulty, and then they return back to where their baseline was. And hopefully, through work with resilience and learning more about this concept, people can thrive and prosper beyond their original levels of functioning. And so many factors come into play with resilience. It could be partly genetic and biological. It could be due to an individual's risk factors. It could be to their personality characteristics or their strengths, or how well they process information or their cognitive processing. But resilience, once it is started, it kind of acts as a chain reaction over time. And not everybody that experiences a trauma experiences necessarily a pathological process after that. Not everyone becomes depressed or anxious. And if those things occur, we can still use resilience to help those individuals to cope. So resilience can actually be as a chain reaction over time, and is actually a quite good response to have after a difficult situation. It is not a new concept. We have heard about it from ancient philosophers, ancient quotes. Our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. We've heard about it from poets, again, philosophers, from Maya Angelou to Friedrich Nietzsche. So it's all about how to move on and how to adapt, not to neglect the difficulties that one has experienced or has felt challenged by, not denying those, not having that difficulty, but encountering that and then not being defeated by it. This tells us that adversity is a very normal part of life. It's been around for centuries. Philosophers and ancient philosophers have talked about it. Adversity does not mean that we are weak. We have strengths to deal with adversity, and it doesn't have to break us, and that we can be resilient. So we've talked about this word resilience a lot. Let's try to talk about what it is. Resilience is an upward spiral of well-being. So again, you've gotten to dip below your baseline, but then you have an upward spiral of your well-being. It allows people to look at all possibilities of what's going on in their world and to see their world more optimistically. It helps them to increase their repertoire of coping skills and to play a bad hand. You know, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. But how to play that bad hand well. And having good emotions buffers resilient people from the difficulties of things like depression or post-traumatic stress or things like that. So it's an upward spiral of well-being and helps you to see all possibilities. In a published model that I have put out several years ago, it looks much more complicated like this, because the experiences that we have each have an impact on our psyche in a different way, and maybe make us fall on a continuum of resilience from low resilience to high resilience. So resilience can be quite complex when we talk about it in the research. However, resilience is generally looking at the difficult experiences of our lives, not putting our heads in the sand and pretending that they don't exist, but having this conscious choice to experience them and still kind of pivot from them and have those full experience of human emotions, to not be consumed by them, to pivot, and to understand that this is a lifelong process so that we can thrive despite them. So again, it's not about minimizing our experiences at all, but using those experiences and pivoting from them and growing from them and eventually thriving through a lifelong process. So CARE's vision is to help individuals that have challenges, and we all will have them, transient or chronic challenges at some point in our life. Challenges are inevitable, and they may seem like unscalable mountains. They may seem like they're insurmountable. However, decades of research tells us that this is quite a common response. Resilience is quite a common response to challenges, that we learn how to pivot, we learn how to grow, we learn how to adapt, and that things do not have to be insurmountable, but that we can flourish even in times of adversity. So the vision of CARE is to build a world that is with greater resilience, and recognizing that we all have character strengths, and then taking those character strengths and equipping and empowering people with them with that scientific knowledge so that people can thrive. One of my favorite paintings is by Rene Magritte from 1936, where he draws this picture. It's a self-portrait, I believe, of him looking at an egg and drawing a full functioning in-flight bird. And sometimes we look at ourselves and we think of ourselves like this egg. We're stagnant, we don't know where to go, we're blocked in, we're closed in. but we can become these full functioning flying birds with a little bit of assistance of understanding the science, getting educated on what those things mean, recognizing our strengths, and then using those to be in full flight. So the mission of CARE is to help clients to apply the science of resilience to their specific needs individually, within a group, or within a company even, or a business, and helping clients to figure out what their character strengths are and how to use those strengths to grow and empower themselves. It's to help clients with tools to flourish and to thrive. And so through personal consultation, through workshops, through trainings, through seminars, we can reach this mission together. And I also wanted to highlight this artwork from out of Japan. And this practice is where they take broken pottery and they seal it together and fix it and make it even more beautiful with gold seals, so that it is even more beautiful after it's been broken. It is more beautiful, even more expensive, and even more valuable because it's been repaired with gold. And so if we can, again, repair with gold, with our strengths, with our growth, with our thriving, we can become even more strong than we were before. And in doing so, we become resilient on all fronts. We become resilient physically. We have endurance and recovery and strength. We've eaten well, slept well, exercised, and become physically strong. We've also become mentally strong in this capacity and are able to make positive decisions and have positive thinking. We're also socially communicative, connected to others, involved in teamwork, and we are mentally aware of where we're supposed to be socially as well. And then we can also be spiritually resilient, yielding to a higher power or to greater meaning, purpose, and perspective, and understanding what our core values are. So when you encounter a stress, do you know what your priorities are? Do you feel invigorated or defeated? What gives you meaning and what motivates you? Have a sense of practice and hope and faith and thinking and doing. And so it's really important that we kind of apply these tools of resilience in many, many aspects of our lives, in all the aspects of our lives. And so in doing so, hopefully we are keeping calm and staying resilient. And hopefully this presentation has kind of helped you understand resilience a little bit better, at least in a short form. And then we can apply this to many aspects of our lives through a consultation with CARE. So here's how you can reach out to me so that you can book one of these consultations or one of these speaking seminars, so that we can delve more in depth about how to grow and thrive through adversity, because adversity does hit, but we can also be resilient. And that is the ultimate point of CARE, is to how to grow and thrive through adversity. So here's my contact information. You can go on my website and call, or send me an email directly through my email or through the website. And I would be happy to talk to you further and see how we can help. Thank you very much for attending this seminar and for joining us today.